I have been using Twitter for over 10 years, maybe 12 years. I've been on for a while, and I remember joining when I was in high school. My friends would have conversations about what they were tweeting, and it was a really fun, enjoyable time. Obviously, you're young, there's nostalgia associated with it, and over time, text platforms have evolved, and algorithms have evolved. The goal of social media has evolved, and its role in society has evolved as well. So there's so much that is no longer as it was. But with that said, the playing field has changed. And I wanted to talk about some of the differences that I'm noticing right now in the text-based platforms and the huge shift that we're seeing from X, or what was previously known as Twitter, to Bluesky and Threads, and my insights on that. First off, why is this important to you? Well, if you are on the internet, you spend time reading information that people put somewhere. You're either going to see it on a YouTube video, you're going to read about it on a forum or on a social media platform, and the way that that information reaches you is really important. What algorithms got it there in the first place? Were you naturally browsing and you found it, or was it presented to you? Did you choose the information, or did the information present itself to you? And at the same time, what are the levers that have to be pulled on the creator's side of things in order for you to be presented that information? The reason I think this is important is because it comes down to media literacy. How are you able to filter through the information on the internet and make sure that you're getting a holistic view of the event that actually happened, rather than just some person's interpretation? The reality is, you'll never have it all figured out. None of us will. But we have to do our best to sift through and figure out the most useful information at the time, and ideally avoid any rage bait or engagement baiting. Those are the types of things that just waste our time, they make us angry, they actually manipulate us. If you really think about it, what's happening is a message somewhere in the ether is being presented to you, and it makes you feel a certain way. It has control over you for that time. And I think it's important for you to assess that and make sure that you have the ability to filter through when necessary. And I do want to preface this with the fact that this is not necessarily a political conversation. I actually don't have a problem with reading conflicting information on the internet about political affiliations or anything. And I'm not really too concerned about some maybe powerful people trying to manipulate social media or buying social media platforms. I want to analyze this, the space as it is, as people use it, and how that might impact you on a daily basis, and how you might think about moving forwards. So a few days ago, I posted this on every platform that I've been using, and there's a massive shift right now of people leaving X and moving towards Threads or Bluesky. Many people moved to Threads about a year and a half ago when they launched, but most people recently have been moving to Bluesky, and there are reasons for that. I did a quick analysis of my success rate on the different platforms, and I figured I would contextualize this here for you. So I posted on X, as I have been since 2012 or before, on Twitter, and really have seen very little engagement. I think some of this is in part because the fact that most of my followers are from a time where I did gaming content back in like 2015. So I have a handful of newer followers, but I don't think many people are surfacing that. And I also think the old followers are probably inhibiting the success of those posts. I did get one new real follow from someone, and that's because I was commenting on their post. They saw my profile and then followed me. That doesn't happen very often, and also that required effort on my part, unrelated to me posting interesting content. At the same time, I posted on Threads, and my content, for the sake of being content, was surfaced through the algorithm to people with a lot of success. Actually, since then, I've had 6 real follows, but even more, I've had follows just from recent posts. And I've actually have a lot of learnings from that and takeaways, but you can see the success there is much larger. So virality is easier on Threads, from what I can tell. And then moving to Bluesky, at least in my time there, has seemed like the most organic, like natural type of place to be. It seems very much like Twitter in the old days. The algorithm doesn't feel like it is really emphasizing engagement baiting. It doesn't feel like the things that I'm seeing are like performative. It does feel like the content that I'm seeing is a little bit more conversational and natural. There are also other things like different feeds that you're able to sign up for in order to see a different type of information. There are also starter packs, which allow you to follow a group of people at the same time. Honestly, I like the algorithm, and I feel like at the times where I've seen political content, I've seen a fair amount of both sides, but not in a way that feels like it's being aggressively promoted to me, just in a way that feels like it's naturally occurring. The first thing that I'm seeing here, I think, is a general misunderstanding of what it means to be a text platform on the internet. And Twitter seemed to do a decent job at this. They were basically a live stream of information from anyone around the world that anyone could tap in on. And over time, that evolved to have a stronger algorithm. But I think X sort of misunderstood that, or Elon, when he started modifying the algorithm, to basically try and make it be what we've heard many times, a town square on the internet. And I think a town square on the internet is conceptually a beautiful idea and equally very frustrating. Town squares and town forums are not really that great to be in if you're just listening to anyone spout off anything at the same time. You hear crazy people on the street yelling crazy things, and at the same time you have someone trying to sell their goods, and all of this is happening in the same exact place. And if you have all of the people on the planet in that same space, you're going to get many conflicting ideas and philosophies at the same time, and they're all competing for attention. My recent experience on X has looked like that. People started to try to get as aggressively loud as possible, almost as if they were competing for attention in this space. I personally haven't found that to be very enjoyable, and it feels like the shift moved from something that was a little bit more comfortable to something that was trying to get you to be uncomfortable, which conceptually, I get where it's coming from. If Elon is sitting there thinking that people do not see enough of both sides, the solution must be to present them with information they disagree with on a regular basis. The problem is people don't necessarily want to use social media in that way, and what they end up doing is just getting frustrated every time they use our platform, which hurts retention, and then only vets for the people that are willing to be very aggressive in those spaces. So what you end up doing is making people leave that don't want to hear contradictory things all the time, and then you end up keeping the people that are looking for a fight, which I don't really want to look for a fight all the time. I have a reason, I have my views, I've figured things out on my own. I'm happy hearing opposing arguments, but I'm not looking for a battle. And I could take this a little further and say even some of the things that Elon Musk proposes doing, I'm not strictly opposed to. I like some of his ideas. Actually, I like many of his ideas. I don't like this engagement bait, sort of like a lowest common denominator tactic to try and get people angry and motivated to do something in a way that I would say is otherwise unhealthy. A false sense of urgency is still false. It's not real. And to push that on people is to manipulate them. Okay, that little rant over. When it comes to the other platforms, I've found Threads to be great for natural discovery. Actually, it feels very akin to something like TikTok. The algorithm performs the same way. I can post something, and if it's novel or entertaining, many people will see it. I have some of my posts that have received 10,000 or more views with many likes and engagements. And I've had a handful of follows from that. The downside being, I don't see many local posts that are related to my community. And I'm not talking about local in terms of location. I'm talking local in terms of the people I'm following or the subject matter that I tend to be more closely associated with. I actually do see a lot of posts from my local community, like people that live near me, which is nice, I guess, but I don't really go to the internet often to try and find people that live next door. I kind of know what the people in my community are doing, and honestly, I'm looking for something that's pretty niche on the internet. That's why I'm going to the internet. There's a reason I'm sharing this online, because I know you probably care more about this topic than someone at the coffee shop down the street. And it's really hard to have a conversation about Threads as a whole without talking about Meta as a company. And this is the same thing as talking about Twitter or X without talking about Elon. Elon's views affect the platform, and in the same way, Meta or Mark Zuckerberg's views affect the platform. I've found that Meta's products, their social media platforms, tend to be, pretty aggressive in terms of presenting you with novel content that keeps you on the platform longer and maybe optimizes for short-term benefit and advertisements rather than real depth. And even Facebook, which has its community groups, still feel like they are a fragment of what you could be getting out of a real community, even something like Discord. So in short, I like the virality that I can get from Threads, but I still feel like that community side is lacking, and they also really haven't started advertising yet. I think that will change soon, and over time, you will see the platform move into something that I think is probably less in the best interest of the community and more in the best interest of the company, which is pretty standard for Meta's products. I don't think anyone looks at Instagram today and says, wow, this is exactly what Instagram always should have been. There are two other relevant things to mention when we talk about these platforms, and that's the protocols that they run on if they are open protocols. Threads is actually running on a different protocol than Bluesky is. Bluesky is running on an open proprietary protocol, whereas Threads is running on ActivityPub, which is open source completely and not really owned by anyone. So W3 actually recommends ActivityPub, which Bluesky is running the AT protocol, which is authenticated transfer. There are other platforms here like Mastodon, and I'll be honest, Mastodon hasn't been very sticky for me. I've had difficulty figuring out how to navigate through the different server communities. The thing I like about Bluesky is that even if I have a sort of like decentralized profile or place to post, I still have this unified place to discover content. Mastodon doesn't really feel that way to me, and I've just had a very difficult time finding things. Even Reddit feels better for discovery to me than Mastodon, because at least I can find a subreddit through this natural hierarchy of information, and things are easily surfaced to me, so it's easier for me to find things. My broader concern about all of these platforms, including TikTok or YouTube, any of these algorithmic platforms, is that I do not, at the end of the day, have control over that algorithm. When I go into my house, I get to choose what I see on my day-to-day life. I get to choose the things around me. I am the one assigning my attention to something. When I go to the internet and I go to an algorithm, it is recommending something to me. If there is an algorithm at play and I do not have fundamental control over it, I'm still actually not in control. There's still someone pulling the ropes in the background to surface things to me that I may otherwise not be interested in. The reality is, if you care about what you see on a regular basis, if you care about filtering content before it gets to your eyes, then you probably want some sort of control over your algorithm. None of these platforms at this point in time allow you to create your own algorithm, allow you to control it in the way you want, say, only recommend things to me that are a day old, only recommend things to me that are the most popular over the course of a week, only recommend things to me that are from my friends in this format based on this subject matter. Until we have that level of fidelity of control, we actually don't control our algorithms. I see a near future where there is an open market for any type of algorithm. And I'm not talking about just a customized Bluesky feed where you pick the type of person that you want to be following. I'm talking about a real control over an algorithm where you get to define what rules and criteria surface information to you. A few years back, I wrote an article called The Future of Group Messaging, and my conclusion in this article was that there should be a second feed inside of a group message. There should be your conversation feed, but then there also should be a curated feed of the primary content and the messages associated with that. So basically a recommended feed that was separate from your normal chat thread. And I did mention that I would do a part 2 on this, which still hasn't happened, but one of my primary motivations behind a part 2 or behind the next step of this would be that you in your group chat would be able to create your own recommendation algorithm. So when you are just trying to catch up on news that happened over the course of the past couple of weeks, you could see an algorithm that you and your group have designed for that type of consumption. Let's say your friend group really likes cat memes, or you have a thread dedicated to cat photos. You could have an algorithm that caters to the funniest cat photos, just because you decided to. For probably the past decade, there's been a conversation around curation, and in some ways an algorithm is doing that, and curation has been seen as largely a human task up until recently. Now, with AI, anyone could theoretically curate any type of information. In the same way, I think you should be able to, in your group chat or on your social media profiles, curate some sort of information, and you should be able to pick the algorithm that actually curates it for you. Now, I promise you this video is not actually a plug. I'm going to talk to you about a project that I'm building, but I don't necessarily recommend you use it yet, and there's a reason for that. A couple of years ago, I built a project called Starlo. Starlo is a website that functions like a social media profile. My argument is that if you join a social media platform, you get all the network effects of that platform. You exist in a kingdom and you can talk to anyone in that community, but as soon as you decide to leave and go somewhere else, all your friends are left behind. All your network effects are left behind. Everything disappears. Because you existed in that kingdom. You existed in that infrastructure. When you decide to leave to go somewhere else, everything remains. But at the end of the day, if you have a blog You can stand on your own. You can go to a website, read someone's information, and you don't have to worry about the platform that they're on. But there's a big problem when it comes to blogs, and it's the fact that they are tuned around text, and they're a little hard to update compared to a social media profile. So I started working on a project that would enable you to make a website that functions similar to a social media profile. I think this is a little hard for people to wrap their heads around sometimes because it looks kind of like a Twitter feed. But the reality is that you can just host it as a personal website. You could probably compare this to Tumblr. You could probably compare this to Substack. At the end of the day, you can have your own domain name. You can run it like a Squarespace website, but it's just as easy to post as clicking the post button and writing what you want and publish. Now, this is just the early days of Starlo, and I'm not necessarily recommending you join right now. There are still a handful of bugs that we're trying to fix. SEO isn't working properly, so if you post something, it's hard to find it from outside the direct URL. But one of the reasons I'm bullish about this as a platform or a structure is that it separates the algorithm and the content host from each other. Anyone could host their own website, they could post content very easily, and the algorithms and recommendation feeds can all be separate. Some of these protocols do seem to fit into this, so the AT protocol or ActivityPub might actually be in our best interest to implement over time. I think there's a very reasonable future where you could have a Starlo page and you could have your own ActivityPub integration where you're able to post content to that federated ecosystem. My personal conclusion: I still use all three of these platforms. I also still use Starlo. But one of the things that I am increasingly concerned about is how people have control and agency over the content that they post online. I think there is a danger in giving any kingdom your content. It's hard to know if a company is going to train on your information, if they're going to modify the algorithm for advertising revenue, if they're just going to start putting more ads into your feed that you don't necessarily want to see. At the end of the day, my primary concern is that you monitor how you spend your time and attention. I have no problem with companies advertising. I think sometimes you want to get your message in front of people, and being able to do that is actually really incredible. It helps subsidize for a free web, so we have the ability to see content from anywhere without having to pay a high bill. But at the same time, we should be paying attention to our side of that deal. We should know what we are seeing and how we are consuming content. With that said, I will be remaining on most of these platforms for the time being. I do it a little bit because, hey, things are fragmented and I just don't know where the community will land. But at the same time, I also like to experiment and I like to see what companies are doing, and I like to critique them to hopefully improve them as time goes on. It's the same way I would critique my own product, as I will critique Starlo in the future. If you enjoyed this type of content, consider subscribing, and thank you for watching.